The bank clerk's hand trembled as he slid the foreclosure notice across the weathered desk, and Olivia Palmer felt her entire world crumble into dust, as final as the drought that had destroyed her cattle, heard that merciless summer of 1882. She stood in the cramped office of the Pinos Altos Savings and Loan, her black mourning dress still crisp despite the New Mexico heat that pressed through the windows like an unwelcome hand, and tried to comprehend how 5 years of backbreaking work could vanish with a single piece of paper. Her husband Thomas had been dead 18 months now, thrown from a spooked horse during a thunderstorm, leaving her alone with their ranch and debts she had not known existed until the creditors came calling. The land stretched across 300 acres of high desert plateau, where ponderosa pines reached toward endless blue skies and mountain springs, fed the grazing pastures that had sustained their small herd before the drought withered everything green into brittle brown. "Mrs. Palmer, I am truly sorry," the clerk said, his watery eyes avoiding hers. "The bank has been patient, but 6 months without payment, and with the outstanding loan your late husband took out to expand the herd, we have no choice. You have 30 days to vacate the property, unless you can somehow raise $1,200. He said the sum as though it were $12, some trifling amount that any reasonable person could produce. Olivia's hands clenched in the fabric of her skirt. $1,200 might as well have been $12,000. She had $63 to her name, money earned from selling her wedding silver and her mother's pearls, items she had clung to through every hardship as touchstones to a life that now seemed impossibly distant. 30 days, she repeated, her voice hollow. The clerk nodded, miserable in his small power. Olivia turned and walked out into the brilliant October sunlight, where the town of Pinos Altos sprawled along its single main street, a collection of adobe buildings and wooden storefronts clinging to the mountainside like stubborn weeds. Miners and cowboys moved along the dirt road, their boots kicking up dust that hung in the still air. She climbed into her wagon, the old mare in the traces swishing her tail against flies, and sat there for a long moment, unable to move. Everything Thomas had dreamed of, everything they had built together, would belong to strangers. The house where they had laughed and made love and planned futures that would never arrive. The barn Thomas had raised with his own hands, every board cut and fitted with meticulous care. The graves of their 2 stillborn children, tiny markers beneath the cottonwood tree by the creek. The thought of those graves jolted her into motion. She could not abandon her babies, even if they had never drawn breath. She snapped the reins and guided the wagon through town, past the general store where Mrs. Henderson watched from the doorway with undisguised curiosity, past the Silver Bell Saloon where piano music jangled even at midday, past the assayer's office and the blacksmith's forge. At the edge of town, where the road began its winding climb into the foothills, a rider on a striking paint horse moved aside to let her pass. Olivia caught a glimpse of a tall man in dusty trail clothes, a black hat pulled low over sun-darkened features, before she was beyond him and climbing toward home. The ranch house came into view as she crested the final rise, a sturdy adobe structure with a covered porch where Thomas used to sit in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the Mogollon Mountains in shades of crimson and gold. The sight of it made her chest ache with a loss so profound she had to pause and steady her breathing. She had been born in Boston, raised in a world of gaslights and cobblestone streets, educated in literature and music and needlework. Her father had been a banker, her mother a governor's daughter, and they had been horrified when she insisted on marrying Thomas Palmer, a Westerner who had come east on cattle business and swept her into a romance that defied every sensible expectation. They had disowned her, and she had not cared because Thomas had been everything to her, strong and kind and full of dreams. She had followed him to New Mexico territory with nothing but love and determination, and she had learned to bake bread in a wood stove, to garden in alkaline soil, to shoot rattlesnakes and nurse sick calves and survive isolation that would have broken the girl she had once been. Now that life was ending and she had nowhere to go, no family to return to, even if pride would allow such a retreat, no money to start fresh elsewhere. 30 days, and then what? She climbed down from the wagon and walked to the graves beneath the cottonwood, where she knelt in the yellow grass and let herself cry for the first time since receiving the foreclosure notice. Her daughters, if they had lived, would have been 4 and 2 years old. Sometimes she imagined them playing in the yard, their laughter carried on the wind, and the phantom sound was both comfort and torment. She did not hear the rider approach until the horse's hooves crunched on gravel near the house. Olivia scrambled to her feet, wiping her eyes, embarrassed to be caught in such a state. The man from town sat astride the paint horse, and as he removed his hat, she saw a face perhaps 30 years in age, lean and weathered, with gray eyes that held unexpected gentleness. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and a few days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw. He held himself with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than out of it. "Madam, I apologize for intruding," he said, his voice a deep drawl softened by courtesy. "I am looking for Mrs. Olivia Palmer." The clerk at the bank mentioned she had headed home, and he said her ranch was up this road. "I am Mrs. Palmer," Olivia said, defensive and confused. "What business do you have with me?" The man swung down from his horse with fluid motion, holding his hat in both hands. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the capable look of a man who knew hard work. "My name is Emmett Vance. I was in the bank today conducting some business, and I could not help but overhear your conversation with the clerk. I want to make you an offer, if you will hear me out." Olivia's spine stiffened. She knew what offers lone cowboys made to desperate widows. "I think you should leave, Mr. Vance. I am not interested in any sort of arrangement that compromises my dignity." To her surprise, he looked genuinely shocked, then embarrassed. "No, madam, you misunderstand me completely. I mean a business offer. I want to buy your land." He spoke quickly now, as though afraid she would send him away before he finished. "I have been looking for property in this area for months. I have been working on a ranch down in the Mesilla Valley, but I have saved my wages, and I am ready to start my own operation. Your land is perfect, good water, good grass when the rains come, close enough to town for supplies but far enough for privacy. I will pay you $1,500, enough to cover your debts and leave you something to start over wherever you want to go." Olivia stared at him, trying to process his words. $1,500, she repeated. "That is more than the bank requires." "I know what I heard," Emmett said. $1,200 to the bank and you should have something left over. It is only fair." He met her eyes directly, and she saw no deception there, only earnest sincerity that seemed almost naive in a grown man. "I can have the money by the end of the week. My boss owes me back wages, and I have funds in a bank down in Las Cruces. We could make it legal and proper with a lawyer and everything." She wanted to say yes immediately to seize this unlikely salvation, but suspicion held her back. "Why?" she asked. "You do not know me. You could offer $1,200 and I would have no choice but to accept. Why offer more?" Emmett looked down at his hat, turning it in his hands. "My mother was widowed when I was 12, he said quietly. "My father died in a mining accident in Colorado, and she was left with 4 children and debts. People took advantage of her situation. We lost everything, and she worked herself to death trying to keep us fed. I swore when I was old enough to make my own way that I would never stand by and watch someone else be cheated if I had the power to prevent it. He looked up again. I am not a rich man, Mrs. Palmer, but I have enough for this, and it seems right. That is all. Something in his words, in the frank honesty of his expression, convinced her more than any elaborate persuasion could have. I accept your offer, Mr. Vance, she said, and I thank you for your generosity. Relief washed across his features. I will go to Las Cruces tomorrow and return with the funds. It will take me about a week, maybe less if I push hard. Will you be all right here until then? I have managed alone for 18 months, Olivia said, more sharply than she intended. Another week will not break me. If he noticed her tone, he did not show it. Yes, madam, I will return as soon as I can. He put his hat back on, touched the brim in a gesture of respect, and mounted his horse. Olivia watched him ride away, disappearing down the road toward town, and wondered if she had just witnessed a miracle or made a terrible mistake. But what choice did she have? At least this way she would have money to start over, perhaps in Santa Fe, or even return to Denver, where she might find work as a seamstress or housekeeper. The thought depressed her beyond measure, but it was better than destitution. The week that followed passed in a strange dream state. Olivia went through the motions of daily life, feeding her chickens, tending her small vegetable garden, cleaning the house with obsessive thoroughness. She found herself noticing details she had overlooked for months: the way afternoon light slanted through the kitchen window, the distant call of ravens in the pines, the particular smell of sage after the night's chill burned off in morning sun. She was memorizing everything, she realized, storing up memories against the loss to come. She packed her personal belongings into 2 trunks, sorting through Thomas's things with tears that came and went like summer storms. His clothes, his razor, his favorite coffee cup, tangible pieces of a man who had been so vital and was now just absence. On the 6th day, Emmett Vance returned. She saw him coming from a long way off, his paint horse moving at an easy lope up the road. Her heart began to beat faster, and she told herself it was just nervousness about the transaction, nothing more. He pulled up in the yard and dismounted, and she saw weariness in the set of his shoulders. "Mrs. Palmer," he said, "I have the money." He withdrew a leather pouch from his saddlebag, heavy with coin. $1,500, as promised. I spoke with a lawyer in Silver City on my way back. He will ride up tomorrow to draw up the papers and make everything legal. They stood on the porch, and Olivia found herself offering him coffee, an automatic gesture of hospitality. He accepted gratefully, and she realized he had probably been riding since before dawn. Inside the kitchen, she poured them both cups from the pot on the stove, and they sat at her small table in awkward silence. Up close, in the domestic space of her home, Emmett Vance seemed larger, more present. She noticed his hands, scarred and capable, wrapped around the coffee cup. She noticed the way he looked around the kitchen, taking in the dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the neat shelves of preserves, the curtains she had sewn from feed sacks and embroidered with careful stitches. "This is a good house," he said. "You have made it a real home." "My husband and I," Olivia corrected, though she did not know why it mattered. "We built this life together." "I am sorry for your loss," Emmett said, and the simple words carried genuine compassion. "How long were you married?" 6 years. It sounded like nothing, a handful of seasons. "But they were good years, mostly. We had hardships, but we were happy." She found herself talking, telling this stranger things she had not spoken aloud to anyone. About Thomas's death, about the stillborn babies, about the drought that had decimated the herd. about her loneliness, the crushing weight of trying to manage everything alone. Emmett listened without interrupting, his gray eyes attentive, and when she finally wound down, she felt oddly lighter, as though sharing the burden had lessened it somehow. "What will you do?" he asked. "After the sale goes through, where will you go?" "I do not know," Olivia admitted. "Perhaps Santa Fe. I could find work there, I think. I am educated. I can read and write and cipher. Surely someone needs a clerk or a teacher." Emmett nodded slowly, but something in his expression suggested dissatisfaction with this answer. He finished his coffee and stood. "I should let you rest. The lawyer will be here tomorrow around noon. His name is Mr. Harrison, and he is honest. I made sure of that." The next day brought the lawyer, a fussy little man with spectacles and a black suit too heavy for the climate. He spread papers across Olivia's kitchen table and explained each clause and provision in exhaustive detail. The sale was straightforward. Olivia Palmer would transfer ownership of 300 acres, including all structures and water rights, to Emmett Vance in exchange for $1,500. Both parties signed. The lawyer witnessed and notarized, and it was done. Olivia held the bank draft in her hands and felt nothing, no relief, no satisfaction, only emptiness. "You have 3 days to remove your personal effects," Mr. Harrison said, snapping his document case shut. "After that, the property legally transfers to Mr. Vance. 3 days." Olivia had thought she was prepared, but the reality struck her with unexpected force. Emmett must have seen something in her face, because he spoke up quickly. "Mrs. Palmer can take as much time as she needs. There is no hurry." "The contract specifies 3 days," Mr. Harrison said primly. "Then we will write a new clause," Emmett said, his tone brooking no argument. "Mrs. Palmer may remain on the property as long as necessary to make proper arrangements for her departure." The lawyer sighed but produced a fresh sheet of paper, and they amended the contract. After he left, trailing dust on his way back to Silver City, Olivia and Emmett stood on the porch in uncomfortable silence. "You did not have to do that," she said finally. "Yes, I did," Emmett replied. "This is hard enough without arbitrary deadlines." He settled his hat more firmly on his head. "I have to go back to the Mesilla Valley to settle affairs with my boss and collect the rest of my gear. I will be gone about 2 weeks. Please do not feel rushed. Take the time you need." He rode away again, and Olivia was left alone with her thoughts and the surreal knowledge that the house around her no longer belonged to her. She went to the bank the next day and paid off the loan, watching the clerk stamp the papers with a finality that should have felt like victory, but instead felt like defeat. She had $300 remaining, enough to live modestly for several months if she was careful. Enough to get to Santa Fe and establish herself, but she could not bring herself to leave. Days passed, then a week, and still she remained, finding excuses and small tasks that kept her rooted to the land. She visited the graves of her daughters every morning, talking to them as though they could hear, telling them about her plans that grew less concrete with each passing day. She rode the property boundaries on the old mare, reacquainting herself with every draw and hilltop. She cleaned the house until it shone, as though making it perfect would somehow make leaving easier. Emmett returned on a cold morning in early November, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. Olivia watched from the kitchen window as he dismounted and began unloading gear into the barn. She should go out there, she thought. She should tell him she would leave tomorrow. Instead, she made a pot of stew, and when evening came, she walked to the barn and found him arranging his belongings in the tack room. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, holding out a covered bowl. "I made too much." His face brightened in a way that made him look younger. "That smells wonderful. I have been living on jerky and hardtack for 2 weeks." He took the bowl with evident gratitude. "Mrs. Palmer, I do not want to pressure you, but have you made plans yet for where you will go?" The question she had been dreading. "Not yet," she admitted. "I am sorry. I know I am trespassing on your hospitality." "You are not trespassing," Emmett said firmly. "This was your home. I do not want you to feel pushed out." He hesitated, then continued. "I have been thinking, and I have a proposal to make. It may sound strange, but hear me out. You know this land better than I ever will. You know the water sources, the grazing patterns, the quirks of the seasons. And well, I need help getting started. What if you stayed on as a partner of sorts? You could teach me what you know, and in exchange, you would have a place to live and a share of any profits from the ranch." Olivia stared at him, trying to understand what he was suggesting. "You want me to work for you." "Not work for me, work with me," Emmett corrected. "An equal partnership. You have knowledge I need, and I have the capital to rebuild the herd. Together we could make this place profitable again." It was madness, of course. A widow and a bachelor living on the same property, what would people say? But even as her mind raised these objections, her heart leaped at the possibility. To stay, to remain in the home she loved, to have purpose beyond mere survival. "People would talk," she said quietly. "Let them talk," Emmett said. "I have a clean conscience. But if it concerns you, I can sleep in the barn. You keep the house. We would maintain proper distance, everything above board." He looked at her with those steady gray eyes. "I am not trying to compromise you, Mrs. Palmer. I am trying to offer a solution that benefits us both." She thought about Santa Fe, about living in some cramped boarding house, working for wages that would barely keep her fed. She thought about never again seeing the sun rise over the Mogollon Mountains, never again hearing the wind in the pines outside her bedroom window. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I accept your offer." The smile that broke across Emmett's face was like sunrise. "Thank you," he said. "You will not regret this, I promise." They drew up a new agreement, this one informal but spoken with the weight of oath. Emmett would run the ranch and make final decisions about stock and expenses. Olivia would manage the household and provide guidance based on her experience. Any profits would be split, 60% to Emmett as primary investor, 40% to Olivia. It was more than fair, more than she had any right to expect, and she said so. Emmett shrugged off her gratitude. "I could not do this without you," he said simply. "You are worth every penny." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Emmett rose before dawn and worked until dark, repairing fences, clearing brush, preparing for the spring when he would buy cattle. Olivia cooked and cleaned and managed the chickens and garden, but she also rode out with Emmett, showing him the hidden springs and the places where grass grew thick even in dry years. They worked in companionable silence much of the time, but gradually they began to talk, sharing stories of their lives. She learned that Emmett had been born in Missouri, that he had 2 brothers and a sister scattered across the West. He had worked cattle drives as a young man, then served as foreman on a large ranch in the Mesilla Valley for 5 years, saving every dollar he could spare. He was 28 years old, 2 years younger than Olivia herself, though the sun and wind had aged him. He did not drink to excess, did not gamble, attended church when he could, though he confessed he was not certain what he believed. "I figure if there is a God, he cares more about how we treat each other than how often we show up in a pew," Emmett said. Olivia found herself looking forward to their evenings, when Emmett would come to the house for supper, and they would sit at the table and talk about the day's work, about plans for the ranch, about nothing and everything. He had a dry sense of humor that surprised her, a way of making observations that left her laughing despite herself. When he smiled, really smiled, his whole face changed, becoming almost boyish. She began to notice things about him. The way his hair curled slightly when he took off his hat, the strength in his hands, the consideration he showed in small gestures. Winter settled over the high country, and while New Mexico winters were milder than what Emmett had known in Missouri or Olivia in Boston, they still brought cold nights and occasional snow. Emmett moved into the barn, making the tack room comfortable with a stove and a cot. He insisted it was fine, but Olivia worried about him being cold out there. One particularly frigid evening, she brought him extra blankets and found him reading by lamplight, a battered copy of Shakespeare's sonnets in his hands. "You read poetry?" she asked, surprised. He looked almost embarrassed. "My mother taught me. She believed that working with your hands did not mean you had to neglect your mind." He showed her the book, its pages soft with handling. This was hers. "It is the only thing I have left of her, besides memories." Olivia felt a rush of affection for this man who contained so many contradictions: rough cowboy and gentle reader, pragmatic businessman and idealistic rescuer of widows. "Would you read to me?" she asked impulsively. "It has been so long since I heard poetry." So Emmett read, his deep voice giving music to Shakespeare's words, and Olivia closed her eyes and let the language wash over her. When he finished, they sat in comfortable silence, and she realized with a start that she was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time since Thomas's death. The recognition brought guilt crashing down. How could she feel this way? How could she enjoy another man's company when her husband had been dead less than 2 years? She stood abruptly. "I should go. It is late." "Olivia," Emmett said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. She stopped at the door. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she lied. "Good night, Emmett." She fled to the house and lay awake for hours, wrestling with her conflicting emotions. She had loved Thomas deeply, mourned him profoundly, and part of her felt that to feel anything for another man was betrayal. But Thomas was gone, and she was still alive, and was she truly meant to spend the rest of her days in solitary grief? She thought of what Thomas would say if he could speak to her now. He had been a practical man, a kind man. He would not want her to suffer needlessly. He would want her to live, to find happiness where she could. The thought brought both comfort and pain. December arrived, and with it preparations for Christmas. Olivia had not celebrated the previous year, too deep in mourning, but this year felt different. She baked cookies and made decorations from pine boughs and red ribbon. Emmett went into town and returned with surprising gifts: a book of poetry by Emerson for Olivia, sugar and spices for baking, and a small carved wooden angel for the mantelpiece. "I saw it and thought of you," he said when she unwrapped it. "The woman who made it said it was a guardian angel, for protection and comfort." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. "It is beautiful, thank you." She had made him a shirt, stitched from good wool cloth, blue that would bring out his eyes. When he tried it on, it fit perfectly, and the pleasure on his face made all the hours of careful sewing worthwhile. Christmas Day they attended services at the little church in town, and afterward, Emmett was greeted by several ranchers who knew him by reputation. They eyed Olivia with curiosity, and she could see the questions forming. But Emmett introduced her simply as his partner in the ranch, and his manner was so straightforward, so free of any hint of impropriety, that the men accepted it. One rancher, a gruff older man named Mr. Sullivan, even nodded approvingly. "Good to see the Palmer place being worked again," he said. "Tom would be glad to know it is in capable hands." That night, back at the ranch, they shared a Christmas supper of roasted chicken and potatoes and pie made from dried apples. Emmett produced a bottle of wine, good wine from California, and they each had a glass. The meal was excellent, the company easy, and when they finished, they sat by the fire in comfortable silence. "This has been the best Christmas I have had in years," Emmett said quietly. "Thank you for that." "I should be thanking you," Olivia replied, "for everything. For buying the land, for letting me stay, for treating me with such kindness. You have given me back my life." Emmett turned to look at her, firelight casting shadows across his features. "You have given me more than you know," he said. "Before I came here, I was just drifting, working for wages, no real home or purpose. This place, this ranch, it is everything I dreamed of. But more than that, you have made it a home. I have not felt truly at home anywhere since my mother died. Until now." Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made Olivia's breath catch. The air between them seemed charged, full of possibility. She was acutely aware of his presence, of the space between them that was at once too large and too small. "Emmett," she said, and did not know what she meant to say next. He stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "It is late. I should let you sleep." He grabbed his coat and hat. "Thank you again for today, for everything." After he left, Olivia sat by the dying fire and admitted to herself what she had been denying for weeks. She was falling in love with Emmett Vance. The realization terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She had not been looking for this, had not wanted it, but feelings did not consult desire. They simply existed, growing like wildflowers in unlikely soil. But what could she do about it? Emmett had been nothing but honorable, nothing but respectful. If he felt anything for her beyond friendship and business partnership, he had shown no sign of it. And even if he did, was she ready? Was it right? The winter passed slowly, as winters do. Emmett worked on the property, building new corrals and repairing the barn roof. Olivia sewed and read and tried not to examine her feelings too closely. They maintained their careful distance, their polite partnership, but underneath ran currents of unspoken emotion. She caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she was not looking, his expression unguarded and tender. And she knew he caught her doing the same. In January, a fierce storm blew through, bringing heavy snow and winds that howled like living things. Olivia worried about Emmett in the barn and went out in the worst of it to check on him. She found him huddled by his stove, wrapped in every blanket he owned, his breath fogging in the air. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You will freeze out here. Come to the house." "I will be fine," Emmett said, though his teeth chattered. "You will be dead," Olivia retorted. "Do not be stubborn. There is a spare bedroom. You can sleep there until the storm passes." He looked torn between propriety and survival. Survival won. He gathered his blankets and followed her through the blinding snow to the house. Inside, the warmth was blessed relief. Olivia made hot coffee and they sat close to the fire, thawing out. The storm raged for 3 days, confining them to the house. They played cards, read aloud to each other, and talked about everything and nothing. The forced proximity stripped away the formality they had maintained, leaving something more real, more honest. On the second night, as they sat by the fire, Emmett spoke suddenly into the comfortable silence. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." His voice was serious, almost pained. She looked at him, her heart beginning to pound. "I know this is probably not appropriate, and I know you may not want to hear it, but I cannot keep pretending anymore. I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I think I started falling in love with you the day I met you, standing by those graves with tears on your face, so strong despite everything. And every day since then, it has just grown stronger." Olivia's breath caught. She had hoped and feared this moment in equal measure. "Emmett, Let me finish," he said. "I know you loved your husband. I know you may not be ready for this, or maybe you will never feel the same way about me. And if that is the case, I swear I will respect it. We can continue as we are, partners and friends, and I will never mention this again. But I had to tell you because carrying it unsaid was becoming unbearable." He looked at her with such raw vulnerability that her heart ached. "You fool," she said softly. "You beautiful, wonderful fool." She moved closer, taking his hand in hers. "I feel the same way. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was too soon, that it was disloyal to Thomas's memory. But I cannot help how I feel. I love you, Emmett Vance." The joy that flooded his face was like dawn breaking. "Truly." "Truly," she confirmed, and then he was kissing her, tentative at first, then with growing passion. Olivia kissed him back, pouring months of suppressed longing into the contact. It felt right, felt meant, and whatever guilt she had harbored dissolved in the warmth of his embrace. They broke apart breathless. "We should probably talk about this," Emmett said, somewhat dazed. "Probably," Olivia agreed, but she did not let go of his hand. They talked long into the night about their feelings, about their future. Emmett wanted to marry her, properly and publicly, if she would have him. Olivia wanted the same, but worried about appearances, about what people would say if she remarried so soon after being widowed. "It has only been a year and a half," she said. "People will think I did not love Thomas, or worse, they will think there was something improper between us all along." "Let them think what they want," Emmett said fiercely. "You and I know the truth. We have done nothing wrong, and I do not want to wait years just to satisfy small-minded gossips. Life is too short, and I nearly lost you before I ever had you. I will not waste any more time." His words struck deep. Life was indeed too short. Thomas had been alive and vital one day, dead the next. None of them were promised tomorrow. "All right," she said. "Yes. I will marry you, Emmett Vance, and to hell with what anyone thinks." They married in February, in a small ceremony at the church in Pinos Altos. A few friends attended, ranchers and townspeople who had come to know and respect them both. Olivia wore a dress of deep green, not willing to marry in black, but also not willing to wear white like a first-time bride. She carried wildflowers that Emmett had picked that morning, their bright colors defiant against the winter landscape. Mr. Sullivan stood as witness along with his wife, a kind woman who hugged Olivia afterward and whispered, "I am happy for you, dear. Tom would be too." They spent their wedding night in the house that was now truly theirs, both of them, and came together with a passion that was both gentle and fierce. Emmett was a tender lover, patient and attentive, and Olivia found herself crying with the sheer, overwhelming emotion of it all. "Did I hurt you?" he asked, alarmed. "No," she managed through her tears. "No, I am just happy. So very happy." Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms, she felt peace settle over her like a benediction. This was where she was meant to be, with this man in this place. The ranch was theirs now in every way, not just legally but emotionally. A shared dream built on loss and hope in equal measure. Spring came to the high desert with explosions of wildflowers and greening grass. Emmett purchased cattle, 50 head of good breeding stock, and suddenly the ranch was alive again with the sound of lowing animals and the daily work of tending them. Olivia worked alongside her husband, discovering reserves of strength and capability she had not known she possessed. The work was hard but satisfying, and she fell into bed each night exhausted and content. In April, she realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with conflicting emotions, joy and terror tangled together. She had lost 2 babies already, and the fear of losing another was almost paralyzing. When she told Emmett, she saw the same fear flicker across his face, but he pulled her close and said firmly, "This baby will be fine. We will make sure of it. Whatever you need, rest, special food, the best doctor, you will have it." He was as good as his word. He hired a young man from town to help with the heavy ranch work, insisting that Olivia should not strain herself. He brought her treats from town, oranges and chocolate, things to tempt her when morning sickness made eating difficult. And when her fear became overwhelming, he held her and talked about the future, about the child they would raise together, about the life they were building. Summer brought heat and thunderstorms that rumbled through the mountains like artillery. The cattle grazed on thick grass, fattening nicely, and Emmett began to make contacts with buyers for the fall. Money was still tight, but they were making progress, building equity. The ranch was becoming profitable, proving the partnership had been not just emotionally right but financially sound. In October, a year after the day Olivia had received her foreclosure notice, she went into labor. The midwife came from town, a capable woman named Mrs. Gonzalez, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. Emmett paced outside for hours, until Mrs. Gonzalez finally called him in to meet his son. The baby was small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and a powerful set of lungs. Emmett held his son with a combination of wonder and terror, his large hands careful and gentle. "He is perfect," he breathed. "He is," Olivia agreed, watching her husband with their child and feeling her heart expand almost painfully. They named him Thomas, in honor of the man who had first built the ranch, and Emmett did not object or show any jealousy. "He should carry his name," Emmett said simply. "It is a good name." The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. The baby thrived, growing strong and healthy, and with each passing month, Olivia's fears receded. She had a living child, a miracle she had thought might never happen. Watching Emmett with his son, seeing the tenderness and patience he showed, made her fall in love with him all over again. The ranch continued to prosper. They added more cattle, expanded their water system, built a new chicken coop, and planted a larger garden. Emmett proved to be a shrewd businessman, selling their beef at good prices and investing profits back into improvements. By the time Thomas was 2 years old, they were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with money in the bank and a herd that was growing each year. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas toddle around the yard chasing chickens, Emmett took Olivia's hand. "Do you remember when I first came here? When I offered to buy your land, of course," Olivia said. "How could I forget? You saved me." "No," Emmett said quietly. "You saved me. I thought I was doing you a favor, thought I was being noble or some foolish thing. But the truth is, buying this land, meeting you, it gave me everything I had been searching for my whole life. A home, a family, purpose. You gave me all of that." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other then," she said. "That seems fair," he laughed, the sound rich and warm. "That seems more than fair. That seems like the best deal I ever made." Over the next few years, their family continued to grow. A daughter arrived, then another son. They named the daughter Sarah after Emmett's mother, and the second son James after Olivia's father, a gesture of reconciliation toward a past that had once rejected her. The house expanded too, with new rooms added to accommodate the growing brood. The ranch became known as one of the most well-run operations in the area, a model of what could be achieved through hard work and partnership. Olivia kept in contact with a few people from her old life in Boston, writing letters that she sent east and receiving occasional replies. When her father died, her mother reached out, attempting to mend fences. The correspondence was stiff at first, decades of hurt not easily overcome, but gradually they achieved a kind of peace. Mrs. Palmer never visited New Mexico, but she sent gifts for the grandchildren she had never met, fine clothes and toys that the children enjoyed if not quite understood. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and the animals. By the time he was 6, he was following Emmett everywhere, learning the work with eager attention. Sarah was wild and fearless, always climbing trees or chasing after the ranch dogs. James was still a baby, content and cheerful. Together they filled the house with noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of childhood. One autumn day, when Thomas was 7 and Sarah 5, Olivia rode out to the cottonwood tree where her first daughters were buried. She had not visited in some time, busy with the demands of the living children, and she felt a pang of guilt for the neglect. But as she stood before the small markers, she felt not grief but gratitude. These babies had been part of her journey, part of what had shaped her into the woman she was now. "Thank you," she whispered to them, to the earth that held them, to whatever force had guided her path from despair to joy. "Thank you for bringing me here." That evening she told Emmett about her visit. They sat on the porch in the gathering dusk, watching their children play in the yard, and she said, "I think I have finally made peace with everything. With losing them, with losing Thomas, with all of it. Not because I do not still feel sad sometimes, but because I can see how it all led here to this life, to you and our children. And I would not change it, not if changing it meant losing what we have now." Emmett pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I know what you mean. I wish you had not had to suffer so much to get here, but I am grateful for every step that brought you to me." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. From the yard came the sound of the children laughing, and from the barn came the soft sounds of the horses settling for the night. The ranch spread around them, a living testament to their partnership, and Olivia felt a contentment so profound it was almost prayer. As the years continued to pass, the children grew and the ranch prospered. Thomas developed a knack for working with horses and began training them for sale, adding another income stream. Sarah discovered she had her mother's talent for gardening and began cultivating medicinal herbs that she sold to the doctor in town. Even young James showed promise, his quick mind perfect for keeping accounts and managing inventory. Emmett and Olivia grew older together, their love deepening with time into something unshakable. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market downturns and cattle diseases, the normal trials of ranching life. But they weathered them together, partners in every sense of the word. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold until the children could recite it by heart. "Daddy bought the ranch and gave it back to Mama," Sarah would say with satisfaction, as though this was the most natural and romantic thing in the world. But Emmett always corrected her gently. "I did not give it back," he would say. "I bought it and asked your mama to help me run it because I knew I could not do it without her, and she was kind enough to say yes." And Olivia would smile and add, "He gave me back my home. But more than that, he gave me a reason to stay and a partner to build a life with." That was the real gift. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Emmett surprised Olivia with a new addition to the house, a small room with windows on 2 sides and bookshelves lining the walls. "A library," he said, leading her inside. "Every proper home should have one, and you should have a place for all your books, somewhere quiet to read." The shelves were already filled with volumes he had been secretly collecting, poetry and novels and history, all things he knew she loved. Olivia cried, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it. "How did you afford all this?" she asked through her tears. "I have been setting aside a little money each month," Emmett admitted. "Ever since I saw how much joy you got from that book of Emerson I gave you that first Christmas. You deserve beauty in your life, not just hard work and sacrifice." She kissed him then, deeply and thoroughly, and later that night, lying in his arms, she said, "I am the luckiest woman alive." "I think I am the lucky one," Emmett countered. "Then we are both lucky," Olivia decided. "How about that?" That sounds just about perfect, he agreed. The children continued to thrive, each finding their own path. Thomas married at 22, a practical rancher's daughter from over near Silver City, and they began talking about expanding the operation, maybe starting their own spread nearby. Sarah, more independent, went east for a year to study with a botanist, returning with knowledge that made her herb business even more successful. James showed such aptitude with numbers that they discussed sending him to college, perhaps to study accounting or business. Olivia and Emmett became grandparents when Thomas's wife gave birth to a daughter. Holding the baby, Olivia marveled at the continuing circle of life, at how joy and loss and love all wove together into something larger than any individual moment. She thought of herself at 26, standing in the bank receiving a foreclosure notice, certain her life was over. She could not have imagined then this future, could not have dreamed she would find love again and build something even stronger than what she had lost. One evening, when they were both in their 50s, she and Emmett rode out to watch the sunset from a high point on their property. The land spread below them, 300 acres that had been bought and sold and bought again, that had been lost and reclaimed and transformed. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked. "Giving up your plans to start a ranch alone, tying yourself to a grieving widow." Emmett looked at her as though she had lost her mind. "Regret? Olivia, marrying you and building this life with you is the best thing I ever did. The only thing I ever did that really mattered. How could I possibly regret it? I just wanted to make sure," she said, smiling, "because I do not regret any of it either, not one moment." He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "We made something good here," he said. "Out of loss and pain and desperation, we made something beautiful. I am proud of that." "So am I," Olivia agreed. They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the same colors that had greeted Olivia on her first day in New Mexico territory decades ago. Then, she had been a scared young bride facing an unknown future. Now she was a woman who had been broken and remade, who had lost everything and found something better. The ranch would continue after them, pass to their children and their children's children, a legacy built on love and partnership, and the simple act of one man choosing kindness when he could have chosen profit. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge, they rode back to the house together, where lamplight glowed in the windows and the sound of their grandchildren's laughter drifted on the evening air. They had built not just a successful ranch but a true home, filled with family and love and the kind of deep contentment that comes from a life well lived. And in the end, that was everything they had ever wanted, everything they had worked and hoped and dreamed for. It was, quite simply, enough. The years continued their steady march, and Emmett and Olivia aged with grace and gratitude. Their children took over more of the ranch operations as they slowed down, allowing them to enjoy their grandchildren and the fruits of their decades of labor. They never stopped working entirely, both too stubborn and too connected to the land to fully retire, but their days became gentler, focused on small pleasures rather than grand accomplishments. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration that lasted 3 days. Children and grandchildren came from across the territory, filling the expanded house to bursting. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed half the county. At one point, someone asked Emmett to tell the story of how he and Olivia met, and he obliged, his voice still strong despite his 53 years. "I heard a widow in trouble," he said, "and I thought I would help her out. Simple as that. Buy her land, give her enough money to start over, feel good about myself. But God or fate or whatever you want to call it had different plans. The moment I saw her standing by those graves, so fierce and sad and strong all at once, I was lost. I just did not know it yet. And I thought he was either a saint or a fool, Olivia added from her seat beside him. Turns out he was a little of both. Everyone laughed, and Emmett pulled her close, kissing her cheek. A fool for you, he agreed. Always have been, always will be. Their grandson, Thomas's eldest son, asked seriously, "Grandpa, did you really buy the whole ranch just to give it back to Grandma?" "Not exactly," Emmett said. "I bought it because I needed land to start my own operation, but I did it in a way that helped your grandma too. And then I asked her to help me run it because I was smart enough to know I could not do it alone, and she said yes, which was the luckiest day of my life." "Second luckiest," Olivia corrected. "The luckiest was when you married me." "You are right," Emmett said. "That was definitely the luckiest." As the celebration wound down and family members departed back to their own homes and lives, Olivia and Emmett found themselves alone on the porch in the quiet aftermath. The house was a mess, dishes and decorations everywhere, but neither of them cared. They sat close together, watching the familiar landscape fade into evening shadow. 25 years, Olivia mused. Where did they go into all this? Emmett said, gesturing broadly. Into the ranch, the children, the life we built. They went exactly where they should have gone. She leaned against him, feeling the solid strength of him, somewhat diminished by age but still there, still steady. "I love you, Emmett Vance," she said. "More than I did the day we married, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," he replied. "More than words can really say." "You are my heart, Olivia. You always have been." They sat together until full darkness fell and the coyotes began their evening song in the hills. Then they went inside, arm in arm, to the home they had built together, the home that had begun with a desperate widow and a cowboy with more kindness than sense. The home that had become a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. In their final years, as age and ailment began to take their inevitable toll, they remained devoted to each other and to the land. Emmett was the first to go, passing peacefully in his sleep at 71 after a winter illness weakened his heart. Olivia mourned him deeply, but without the devastating despair she had felt at Thomas's death. She had been blessed with nearly 30 years with Emmett, 30 years of partnership and love, and she carried those memories like treasures. She lived another 5 years, staying active on the ranch as long as her body allowed, surrounded by children and grandchildren who cared for her with the same devotion she had always shown them. On her last day, she sat on the porch in her favorite chair, wrapped in a quilt Sarah had made her, watching the sunset paint the mountains. Thomas, her eldest, sat with her, holding her hand. "It is a beautiful evening," she said softly, "the kind your father loved." "He is waiting for you," Thomas said, his voice thick with tears. "I know he is." "I hope so," Olivia said. "I have missed him terribly, but I am grateful for every moment I had with him, with all of you. I have had such a good life, better than I ever dreamed possible." As the sun touched the horizon, she closed her eyes and let go, slipping away as gently as a leaf falling from a tree in autumn. She died as she had lived her last 3 decades, surrounded by love, in the home that had been lost and reclaimed and transformed into something more than anyone could have imagined that desperate day in 1882, when a widow received a foreclosure notice and a cowboy decided to help. They buried her next to Emmett on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains and the valley where their cattle grazed. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates of their lives, but underneath, by request of their children, were inscribed the words that had defined their marriage. Partners in all things, bound by love, built on faith. The ranch continued for generations, as they had hoped it would, passed down through their children and grandchildren. Each generation told the story of how it began, of the widow who lost everything and the cowboy who bought her land and gave it back by making her his partner and his wife. It became a tale of hope and redemption, proof that even in the hardest times when loss seems complete and final, new beginnings are possible. That kindness can change lives. That love, when it comes, should be grabbed with both hands and held tight, no matter what anyone else might think or say. And through it all, through more than a century of changing times and circumstances, the ranch remained, a testament to two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built something lasting from the ashes of despair. Their great-great-grandchildren still worked the land, still drew water from the same springs, still watched sunsets from the porch of the house that Olivia and Emmett had made a home. The graves under the cottonwood tree, marking the babies who had never lived, were still tended and remembered. The library Emmett built for Olivia still held books, though now they included volumes written by descendants who had inherited her love of learning. And on quiet evenings when the wind moved through the pines with a sound like distant voices, workers on the ranch would swear they could feel the presence of those two, the widow and the cowboy who had loved each other and the land with equal devotion. Whether it was truth or imagination hardly mattered. Their legacy was real, written in the soil and the stones, in the generations that followed, in the enduring proof that from great loss can come great love, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are the doorways to our best. The ranch stood and would stand, a monument not to wealth or power but to partnership and perseverance, and the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to help someone in need. It stood as proof that buying land is one thing, but building a home requires love. And that sometimes the best gifts are not the things we give away, but the things we choose to share. Emmett had bought the ranch and made Olivia his partner, and together they had created something that mattered, something that would outlive them both and continue to matter for generations to come. In the end, that was the truest measure of their success. Not the acres they owned or the cattle they raised or the money they earned, but the family they created and the love they shared and the home they built together. It was everything they had wanted, everything they had worked for, and it was enough. More than enough. It was a legacy of love that would never truly die as long as anyone remained to remember their story and honor what they had built.